Thank you for that lovely introduction, David, and greetings to everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this jointly hosted workshop on such a critical and timely topic. My name is Mina Wales, and I have the honor of serving as the Deputy Associate Administrator for International Trade at the U.S. Small Business Administration. My office at the SBA is the leading advocate for small businesses and international trade. We provide solutions to the problems that small businesses often cite as holding them back from trade, not knowing where to start, how to get access to capital, and obtaining reliable information about global trade opportunities. An important and significant part of our work at SBA is empowering women entrepreneurs to start and grow their businesses. One way we do this is through our Women's Business Center program, which is dedicated to meeting women entrepreneurs where they are through a robust network of over 140 women business centers, or WBCs, located across the U.S. and its territories. These centers serve as a vital resource, providing tailored support to address the specific needs of their clients. Our WBCs also partner closely with other U.S. government agencies, the private sector, to better equip women with the tools they need to succeed. Many of these centers offer services in multiple languages and have flexible hours for training classes, which cover essential subjects like finance, management, marketing, and more, all critical areas for SMEs looking to thrive in today's competitive landscape. In the United States, women are leading the charge with the highest startup rates for small businesses, and globally, women own about 1 in 3 businesses. This statistic highlights the tremendous potential that is behind investing in women entrepreneurs. However, we must also acknowledge that women continue to face unique challenges in growth and participation in supply chains, including limited access to capital, insufficient support networks, and in some cases, enduring social and legal constraints. Today, we are fortunate to be hearing from a diverse panel of speakers, including women leaders in international trade, government officials, and experts from across the private sector. Their insights and experiences will provide us with valuable perspectives on how we can work together and unlock the full potential of women entrepreneurs and create a more gender-inclusive supply chain in our respective countries. I encourage all of you to fully engage in the discussions we have today. Thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to the U.S. Mission, to the OECD, and the CSMEE for your invaluable partnership with the SBA in advancing the interests of small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina, and welcome to all of you on behalf of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities. And allow me to welcome all of the entrepreneurs, associations, the delegates from the Committee on SMEs and Entrepreneurship, and to thank, first of all, the U.S. Mission for having inspired the organization of this workshop that I think received a lot of interest and appreciation when we communicated to our delegates at the OECD. And I think a reason for this is that women entrepreneurship, promoting women entrepreneurship, is a policy priority across all OECD countries and well beyond. And we know that the reason for this is that progress has been slow and uneven in spite of the increasing attention on this agenda. We know that there are, and we, throughout our work, we monitor and measure long-standing gaps in entrepreneurship. But today we're going to zoom in into a specific gap when it comes to women entrepreneurs, that is to say, their participation to global trade, to global supply chains that we know are an important lever for growth. for entering into knowledge networks, for technology absorption. So it's very important when we talk about the untapped potential of women entrepreneurs also to look at how they are engaged in global supply chain. The reason for the slow progress also in this area is, of course, related to some overarching challenges. We know that women entrepreneurs or female-owned businesses are underrepresented, for example, in the fields that are more oriented towards global market, like the STEM field. Many women are operating businesses in sectors that are less export-oriented, and they perceive or they face challenges that are heightened when they try to trade in comparison with other activities, for example, accessing networking, mentoring, participation in trade missions, access to finance. At the OECD, we've been trying to identify what does it mean for countries to continue to have such a gender gap in entrepreneurship, and the estimate is substantial. Basically, we calculate that addressing long-standing barriers for women entrepreneurs, for example, to access finance, could create $5-6 trillion in potential net value addition worldwide. That's enormous. For financial institutions themselves, this is a missed opportunity, growth opportunity that we can estimate in $1.7 trillion. So the overall aggregate impact of getting more women into this could be enormous, but yet we meet challenges. Now, in this workshop, we're going to focusing on how to close this gap, but also what policy can do about this. And the discussion that we look forward to is building somehow on the work of the Committee on SMEs and Entrepreneurship. We have been monitoring trend in women entrepreneurship, and we've also been providing advice to countries in implementing an important OECD legal instrument in this area, which is the OECD Council recommendation on gender equality that has an important pillar that focuses on entrepreneurship. So we look very much forward to the discussion today, to learn more, to hear from experiences on the ground. And in particular, we hope to somehow contribute to promote awareness and understanding, first of all, of why it's so important to get more women entrepreneurs in supply chain, what are the main challenges and what governments can do. So we look forward to discuss, share good practices, but also what can we do more to raise awareness among women themselves and among women entrepreneurs. So we know that there is a lot of knowledge, experience around the table, and it's much more interesting to therefore move to your voices and to hear from you. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. So I hope you've all seen the program. Before we get into it, we'll just do a quick overview. The session that we're going to start with is going to be looking at the experiences of women entrepreneurs. And so we're very lucky to have several of women entrepreneurs who've come to join us today to tell us about their experiences, including both their challenges and their successes, and to talk to them and to learn about how they see things and what they think could be useful for governments and other actors to help address some of the challenges that have already been raised today and some of the ones that they will tell us about. Then we're going to have a session that looks at different approaches currently being used by governments, by private sector actors and NGOs to try to address some of these gaps and issues. And then we're going to close today with a third session that does a look specifically at the semiconductor sector. And so we'll take a closer look at one specific case study. So I'm going to move into the first session now. And so I'm going to invite the moderator, Anna, and the two panelists in the room to come up to the front while I start my presentation. And we have two additional speakers online. And So we're going to have some discussions. There'll be time for questions and answers and comments. So please feel free to engage. And that also includes those of you who are following online. So just going to move over as well. So I wanted to set the scene for our first discussion and tell you a little bit more about our work at the OECD on this issue and to tell you a bit how this fits into OECD policy priorities. So I think the main point is that this is a priority issue for the OECD. We have a new gender strategy that was launched last year, and this calls on all OECD committees to invest more in addressing gender issues. It calls for investments in data. It calls for mainstreaming analysis across all activities of the committees. It calls on the organization to continue to be at the frontier of policy in this area and to push further, and to, of course, do more outreach with all stakeholders around these issues. And so as part of that initiative, the Committee for SMEs and Entrepreneurship is, of course, doing its part. And today, this is one example of how the committee is engaging in this issue. And this builds on the council recommendation from a decade ago. And we can still see that, this is a long-standing issue, and it's still a priority because the progress has been so slow. Now, the interest, of course, from our committee's perspective is that if we're able to close some of these gender gaps in entrepreneurship, there can be great benefits for our economies. Namely, we can have more innovation, more growth, and more job creation. So just to give you an idea about the gap and what's been happening in recent years, I've put this slide together to look at the ratio of men and women in early stage entrepreneurship across OECD countries. And so it's a ratio. So at the top, we've got 1-to-1. That means equality, men and women. And then as we go down, we see 3 women for every 4 men, 1 woman for every 2 men, and so on. And so we can see that there's a sizable gap in most countries. Now, the good news is that if we look at the black diamond, which is for the most recent period, compared with the white diamond, which is for the first half of the past decade, we can see that across most countries, the gap has narrowed slightly. Now, despite that good news, as Lucia said in the introduction, this is a huge cost for our economies. And there have been a number of different estimates. Canada, UK, and several countries have estimated the cost in terms of GDP. And the estimates are about in the ballpark of 6 to 10%, assuming that women are starting and growing businesses at the same rate of men. So it's really an issue of great magnitude. Another way to look at it is if we say, well, if everybody was as active as the most active and the most successful entrepreneurs, how different would our world be? And so in this thought exercise, we said, well, those who are most likely to start businesses and most likely to create jobs, drive innovation, export, that's sort of men ages 30 to 49. And so if we say, well, everybody in the economy was as active as this group, there would be about 30 million more entrepreneurs across the OECD. And that's 30 million entrepreneurs who are pursuing opportunities. We've put aside those who have said, well, I started a business because I couldn't get a job. So these are representing a cost for our economy, an opportunity cost. And of this, about 7 out of 10 are women. So clearly, if governments want to address this gap of these missing entrepreneurs, it's really a gender issue that should be the top priority. And this, of course, is explained by many factors. I've just picked a few examples. There are differences in motivations for entrepreneurship between men and women on average. I'm showing here that there's a difference in expectation to start a business. There are also differences in the amount of resources that an individual has, whether it be skills, finance, networks. There are gender gaps across almost all of these metrics. And finally, there are also significant gaps in access to external resources. Here I've put use of bank loans, but we could put different metrics, venture capital, and the gap would be even greater. But today we want to look at supply chains and how women entrepreneurs are operating across countries. And so to start moving the discussion in that direction, I've got some data here that shows that women entrepreneurs who are at the early stage of their business, so they're just starting their business and it's a young business, they're less likely to report that they have customers in other countries, across almost all countries. And so this points to the gap that Lucia mentioned. And we're going to dive further into this later, as I've got a colleague from another directorate who will show you even more data and tell you more layers to this story. But what I want to do is just open the door for the discussion today and let you know that we've got a range of work in this area, a number of different publications, our Missing Entrepreneurs report, and there's a horizontal report that was produced by colleagues across all directorates last year called Joining Forces for Gender Equality. That looks at different issues. So there will be employment, education, entrepreneurship, trade, and so on. So that's another resource you might want to look at. So I'm going to stop here, and we're going to now turn to our entrepreneurs and hear firsthand about their experiences. So we're going to move from these high-level data to real life. So I'm going to pass it over to Ana Costa Paula, who is the delegate to the CSMEE from Portugal, and she's the head of policy unit at the Ministry of Economy. So Ana, over to you.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here and to be moderating such an important panel, such year and listening and learn from such inspired women. So I would start by doing a brief introduction of the panel. We have two of our panelists here in person and two online. Thank you for the ones that join us online. So first I would like to present Dr. Kimberly Brown, founder and CEO of Amethyst Technologies and Aeon Technologies. Anya Gertz, founder of IS Jewelry and co-founder of Paloma. She's online. Yes, I see you. Thank you. Jean-Marie Jaroge, founder and chief trade strategist, Trade Moves, also online. Hello. And in person, Awaya Mohammed, co-founder of Affordable 4Bytes and The Colors. I would like to ask you to briefly present yourselves and talk about what you're doing, what's your experience. So I will start by Dr. Kimberly, then pass the floor to Anya, and then Sean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, Anna, for the introduction, and thank you, David and the OECD for the invitation to speak. So I'm Kimberly Brown, CEO of Amethyst Technologies. We are a US-based company that has a focus on quality assurance and compliance services to set up and optimize clinical laboratories, pharmaceutical manufacturing, research programs, and government health initiatives, including pandemic epidemic responses. During the COVID pandemic, we were able to use our expertise working in Liberia during Ebola to stand up diagnostics safely and effectively for that pandemic, to set up a laboratory called Aeon Technologies in Maryland in 2020 to respond to the COVID pandemic. And Aeon Technologies, we are a full-service clinical laboratory that provides phlebotomy services for our community and also supports research initiatives. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. So my name is Awiya Mohammed. No worries, it's okay. I am used to it. I am used to it. So very quickly, just to let you know, I was born and raised in France. I am originally from Somalia. I have co-founded the first initiative in 2015, which is Afrobytes, which was a platform. I say was because I will tell you after what it has become now, which was a platform to connect African tech entrepreneurs with the international tech ecosystem and stakeholders who were looking for investment and growth opportunities in African markets. And more recently, but even if it was in 2019, I created another initiative called The Colors, which is an agency specializing in the fast-growing multicultural beauty market. I have also worked in major international companies, especially in the media field, such as RTL, and more recently in the luxury industry, in companies such as Kering and Cartier. So my passion lies, and you will see it, in building bridges and community engagement. What I really like also is connecting individuals with ideas, especially when they have nothing to do together. And yes, my work is really to create synergies and also new paths of collaboration.
Thank you. Now I would like to pass the floor to Anya.
Hello, good morning. My name is Anya Geertz. I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to the OECD and to the US Mission for organizing such a exciting conversation about understanding and transparency of female supply chains. I've spent 20 years of my career working with small artisanal miners, mostly in Central and South America, as it relates to the jewelry industry, so metals and gemstones. And I currently no longer work actively in supply chains, but I did spend many years working in the different mining communities in Latin America. So I'm excited to share some of my personal experience and understanding as a woman that spent a lot of time, especially 20 years ago, in small artisanal mining communities, and then seeing some change towards incorporating local women in mining communities in Central and South America. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And last but not least, Sean.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to be on this panel. Thank you for the invitation. I am Sean Marie Jarosz. I am the founder and chief trade strategist for Trade Moves. Trade Moves is a small cross-border trade advisory firm. We're based in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. We work where trade operations and trade policy connect. So when governments take measures, impose measures, or take policy actions, we're looking at the impact on how the movement of goods and services across national borders. Our team works with U.S. exporters that are putting their products into global markets and into global supply chains. We also work with U.S. manufacturers that are sourcing inputs and materials from global supply chains to support U.S. manufacturing. And we primarily focus on food, agriculture, and consumer products. And we champion small and women-led businesses. I am delighted to be part of an advisory committee to our government on priorities in supply chains for small, minority, and women-led businesses. And so I'm delighted to be here to talk about this with the other entrepreneurs. So thank you.
Once again, thank you all, and once again, welcome. So I would like to start our first round of questions about talking about your motivation. So it's a question for all of you, and I will start by asking first to Awaya, sorry. Could you please tell us about your motivations for wanting to get linked into supply chains? How did you take your first step?
Okay. So, sorry. There's someone who says something which is very interesting. His name is Warren Buffett, and he says something. He says the market is always right. And when I won't talk about Afrobytes, because Afrobytes has become now a business club, because when we started Afrobytes, it was at the very beginning, when we were talking about innovation in Africa, and for us it was important to create, encounters between those African entrepreneurs and those international stakeholders. But now that you may have seen the dynamic in Africa in terms of tech, even if it's still there, has slowed a little bit. So now it has become for us a business club. But as Warren Buffett says again, so it is always interesting to read the market. And just before the COVID, I realized that there was a huge growth in the demand of natural ingredients. And I was looking at it, very carefully, and I saw that all those ingredients were, most of them, coming from Africa. And you may have seen that at that time, a lot of people, because they could not go to hairdressers and they couldn't go to buy something, so they create their own cosmetics. So I said to myself, there's something interesting here, which is interesting. And so my motivation first was to highlight the fact that those ingredients, most of them are coming from Africa. The second thing was also to valorize those ingredients. It was very important for me. And I also wanted to highlight the fact that in this industry, most of the actors are women, especially at the very beginning of the value chain, and most of them are farmers. So they were my first motivation. And I just have a quick question for you in the room. Who in this room knows that perfumes such as J'adore and Chanel Numéro 5 are crafted with ylang ylang from Comoros Island? Who knows it? Okay, so this is exactly what I wanted to do, is to promote, their work, because they are also the stars, of the industry. And for me, it was important just to valorize what they are doing. And it's a pity that we couldn't bring a presentation, because I would have loved to show you something, because I just come back from New York where I had an event there with the industry. And you may know Nielsen IQ, which is a consumer intelligence agency. And they showed us all the ingredients, in the beauty industry, which are gaining, as they say, we are seeing dollars growth in beauty. So it was interesting to see that ylang ylang oil is the first. You also have shea butter, of course. You have vanilla from Madagascar. You have also jasmine, cocoa butter, and cloves ingredients. And for me, it was important just to highlight that this sector today has to be considered as a growth sector. So yes, these are my motivations.
Fascinating. So now I will ask the same question to Sean. What are your motivations and first steps?
Thank you. Yeah, motivations and first steps. So in terms of starting trade moves, I had been working in this field of working on cross-border trade, and I wanted to continue to support companies on their cross-border trade strategies, helping them to maximize opportunities and minimize barriers. I was lucky I had some very good mentors, female mentors, who supported me starting the business and continuing when my boss decided not to be working in this field. And so it was an opportunity for me to grow. So I was motivated also because I've worked in trade for a long time, and our tagline at Trade Moves is we're passionate about trade, and we believe that trade makes the world a better place. I mean, the fact that I was saying, thinking about supply chains and where our products come from, they come from around the world, and many inputs. And it's just that passion for being able to access new customers, access new suppliers has really been my motivation. And we've seen it be both opportunity and challenge. I'll say that when we see companies, you asked the question about first steps, and for me, my first steps were not as difficult as other women entrepreneurs. But we see when those who are wanting to get into global supply chains, they want to get access to those new customers. They want to get access to those diverse suppliers. And typically we see maybe they go to one market. Maybe they see, a neighboring market, or where there's similar culture or language, or there might be a diaspora community, and they want to take that first step. And so they enter one market. And what we're trying to also promote is not just put all your eggs in one basket. If you're going to participate in global supply chains, they need to be diverse. They need to be global, not just bilateral. And so don't just look at one market, look at 2 or 3 as you're exploring. And so that's sort of our motivation, is to help those companies diversify beyond their own domestic market, find a new market, understand the barriers and the complexities and the import requirements, and then be able to leverage those. And if you can do one market, that's a very good start. But we try to put the gauntlet down to say, can you do two or three to diversify and provide more opportunities? Because most of the consumers in the world are outside of your market. So that's really been our motivation in how we support SMEs, smaller exporters, including women-led businesses.
Thank you. Anya, do you want to share the story or experience?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So my story is very organic. I was living in Mexico. I was studying jewelry in Mexico, and I became very interested in the communities in the supply chain of jewelry, and I became very invested in the communities and in the families that were involved in the supply chain. And I, from a very young age, so this was 20 years ago, it was very important for me to have a very traceable supply chain, and knowing where my business was supporting and seeing the small footprint of change that I could have in some of these communities and in these families was it was very important to me, and it was a passion. And so I worked mostly in open pit mining and alluvial mining operations, very small independent contract workers. Most of these miners either worked independently and gave a commission to the landowner, or sometimes were sort of had a very small group that had a lead that was paying them. And I was also, motivated and interested by the fact that I was a female in a very traditionally male-dominated sector. A lot of the mining situations I was in, they had never seen a woman in a mine. So that came with its own challenges. I had to overcome some gender stereotypes and really kind of forge my own path in terms of being taken seriously in the supply chain. But in the end, it was really about building those connections. And all of these individuals are entrepreneurs. They're small business owners or entrepreneurs, as I was and still am. So yeah, my motivation was really my passion for the communities and that deep human connection and seeing the footprint of change that I could have in those communities.
Thank you. And now I would like to pass the floor to Dr. Kimberly, please.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So my motivation began with my expertise in systems modeling and characterization as a chemical engineer. My first step was an internship when I was working my PhD, and I worked at US Army vaccine program. And the first month I was there, I developed a software that was used to enhance compliance for the vaccine manufacturing to FDA standards. And 9 years later, I ended up buying out my boss, the company I worked for, and started Amethyst Technologies in 2006 with US Army as our first client. And we were providing engineering services for vaccine manufacturing. 1 year later, due to our success, we were awarded a contract to run the US Army's malaria research program in Tanzania and Kenya. Essentially, there had been a challenge where malaria clinical trial failed due to diagnostics that weren't accurate. So we were given 1 year to turn around diagnostics in 10 rural healthcare centers. And we used that to really start working overseas. As a small business, we were 5 people. We never thought about working in Tanzania. I'd never been to Tanzania. So it really opened our eyes to the opportunities. And then our company, we really focus on the healthcare supply chain. We started off, we were just engineers, but we saw an opportunity. When you put engineering principles into different sectors, you can come out, in partnership with others with, solving critical problems. So Amethyst, we support all aspects of the healthcare supply chain: diagnostics, clinical research, pharmaceutical manufacturing, logistics, facilities, equipment, information technology, and also national security, developing diagnostics and blood banking programs for military purposes. And we support US governments, foreign governments, and the private sector in the US and Africa. We solve problems across the healthcare supply chain with a classical engineering approach, defining the problem through a gap analysis, establishing the system boundary, specifying the compliance requirements, identifying key performance indicators, developing procedures and processes, innovation, creating reporting mechanisms, and positioning these programs for success after we are gone. After delivering on more than 50 US government projects and numerous private sector projects in the US and abroad, when the COVID pandemic occurred, we used our expertise in Liberia and we set up a laboratory in 3 months in a rural area in Maryland that didn't have access to diagnostics. We use our experiences from working in numerous countries in Africa and the Middle East to adapt to the need for fast and accurate COVID diagnostics. Our expertise across the entire supply chain was key to a right the first time approach. We designed our lab. It was based in a loading dock, so we had to renovate the loading dock within 3 months. We chose the right equipment from a trusted vendor to ensure we had no stockouts or downtime. We had a lean team because we didn't have many resources to establish our facility. And we had a validated partnership with Johns Hopkins, who we'd worked with in Liberia during the pandemic. So we leveraged that. Beginning with a goal of 25 tests per day in a small community of 11,000 people, we performed 1,000 tests the first week and then 150,000 tests over a 2-year period, with most of our tests on the same day from when we started. Now we are exporting our laboratory services. We're working in Uganda, we're working in Liberia to focus on preventing disease of epidemic potential from going unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. So after thank you. Words that come to my head about your motivations, I think about passion and commitment, and I think that's really main drivers for what you are doing. And yes, so now let's try to explore some sector-specific challenges. And I would like to start by addressing a question to Anya. Anya, you already touched on the fact that mining is traditional male dominated, especially in field operations and supply chain logistics. So what obstacles have you observed for women within this supply chain? And in your opinion, what impact does informality have on women entrepreneurs in these supply chains?
Great, yes, thank you. So I'll touch on 2 different key sort of minerals that I've had a bit of experience with. One is jewelry, so gold, silver, gemstones, and the other is in a bit of a broader context. I did have a bit of experience with tantalum and mineral supply chain in Uganda around tantalum. So I will talk about those 2 experiences specifically. And I think starting with the jewelry, I would say in the early 2000s, women were very much a peripheral role. And a number of reasons for that. One, mining is quite labor intensive. They do have the role in the home, which is obviously a key factor in getting women involved in the supply chain. And then I found that there was very much a relationship between the mineral and a gender association with who should be mining that mineral. So oftentimes the higher value minerals had very specific gender associations in terms of mining. So gold and diamonds have traditionally been associated with males. And there's lots of stories worldwide about stereotypes of women in supply chains. The famous one is in Sierra Leone. It's considered to have bad luck. It's considered bad luck to have a woman in a diamond mine. So that automatically eliminates the opportunity for women to be in the diamond mining right in the heart of it where they could actually make the most money. So women traditionally have been on the outside in terms of jewelry of the supply chain. I saw a lot of women in sort of the secondary phase. So after the gemstones are mined, they're sent for cutting. Women would often be in more of that role, so the cutting and polishing of the stones, and then less so in the jewelry manufacturing again. So I do find that association with minerals in terms of value and gender specificity was and is global, I would say. I do know that it's true in many different areas of the world. The second thing I'll touch on is I did work remotely during COVID on a project for about a year with a tantalum mining operation in Uganda. And the concept was really around what had been happening in that particular area was that it was very difficult for women to get into some of the higher value mineral mining operations. So socially, there's obviously lots of complex social layers. And so what we had discovered was that tantalum, which is something that's used in electronics, it's quite a high value metal. There was actually a waste material being produced from the tantalum mining operations, which was mica and kaolin, which are traditionally used in cosmetics. So the tantalum mines had actually been sort of, they were dormant for many years, and there was this large amount of mica and kaolin discovered in these mining communities. So what we tried to do was create a project for a closed female supply chain to mine that mica and that kaolin, because it was a mineral that didn't really have the traditional gender associations with it. We didn't end up getting funding for the project in the end, but I did think, looking forward to semiconductors, perhaps that's an interesting opportunity, because my understanding of semiconductors is that it generally relies on quartz. And quartz is a very common mineral, and I actually worked in a gold mining operation where quartz was the waste material for in this particular gold mine. So I think there would be an opportunity there perhaps to do something similar in terms of engaging women in sort of mining that waste material, and it might be easier socially to do than trying to get them involved in some of the kind of primary minerals like gold and diamonds. I do think it is possible, and things have changed significantly in the last 20 years. And a lot of that has been done through kind of unwrapping those social layers and trying to get everyone involved. So making sure the men are also supportive of involving women in that mining operation. So yeah, I think that's my main points there.
Thank you. Moving on to Sean. Women often play critical roles in the food and agriculture sectors, but often have limited access to resources and markets. In your perspective, what specific challenges women face with the food and agriculture supply chain, and what type of initiatives or programs could help to overcome these barriers?
Yeah. Thank you. So I see three areas that we see significant challenges for women. One is access to credit, financing, financial services. I see that also there is typically in food and ag, you may see more importers in an export when you're exporting to a market, be dominated by males, and so making those connections for female for those who are women-led businesses, and trying to make those connections, I think, really about networking and being able to make those connections to other women in that market. And then finally, I see regulatory barriers, really market access issues, which are not gender specific. I mean, regulatory barriers can be based on country of origin, maybe harder for food and ag products to get into a market. They may be imposed because you want to protect your own domestic farmers or food producers. And so these three different barriers, especially the access to financing. As Mina was saying, in the United States, for instance, we have the Women Business Centers, we have the SBA that are trying to help provide additional funding. When it comes to the connections to importers, seeing trade missions that are more focused on women entrepreneurs and women connecting with women. And making it easier, not only with trade missions, but at trade events to make those connections happening are quite important. And on the regulatory barriers, there's a lot of information, for instance, that we have in the United States, that we have the Commerce Department or the U.S. Department of Agriculture is providing as much market intelligence as they can, so that if the barrier to entry is information, which I know that was one of the points that David pointed out, is access to information, having understanding the ease or the complexity of a regulatory environment, how easy is it to get your food into a market, is really important, so that women are doing much more of that preparation up front. If you're exporting to the United States, for instance, we have a fairly open market. Our tariffs are low. You don't need to register your product. We have minimal facility registration requirements. You don't need to approve your label. Our tariffs are pretty low. But for women who are exporting to other markets, you're going to see barriers where you're going to have to give a lot of information on your product registration requirements. They might want to know your processing or your formulas or your ingredients. There could be quite complex facility registration. You might need to get your label approved. You may have to test before the product leaves the market, when it comes to the border, or even when it's on the shelf. And tariffs could be high. So having that information, so that when you find that importer in the market and you're making that export sale, you understand what it's going to take to get that product across the border and onto the shelf. And so we're seeing more focus in the United States, and I think in other markets as well, providing information to targeted groups of women who are really in need of more intelligence, so that they are comfortable in being able to enter the export market. So that's what we're seeing from the food and ag side in our experience.
Thank you. Turning on to the ladies here in the room. So, and starting with Dr. Kimberly, my question is the fact that the tech industry is often seen as forward thinking, but gender diversity remains a challenge. So what unique barriers do women face in the tech supply chain, especially regarding access to resources? And how can these challenges be addressed to create a more inclusive environment?
Thank you very much, Hannah. So as far as challenges, for me and for many women, not seeing somebody that looks like you, that somebody that you know that you can get advice from. So I started a company. I didn't know anybody I didn't have a close relationship with anyone who owned a business. I didn't have a close relationship with anyone who was an engineer. So I started a business and I was struggling to get information. You don't have resources. And what I did, there's two things. I looked for one person that I thought could help me establish a network. So I joined the county that I live in. I live in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. I joined the Minority Business Board in Anne Arundel County. And the person who ran that board, I told her about my challenges. I just started a business and I don't know anybody. I need help. And so I asked her if she could go into her network and assemble 5 or 6 key people in different sectors. And I'm going to buy them a lunch. I'm going to invest in a lunch for them and pitch my business. So that was the first thing that I did. Pitch my business to, there was an attorney in the room. There was an accountant. There was a person who had an M&A expertise. And there was somebody with SBA. So this group became my kind of informal board where I could answer questions. So if you look at ways to kind of create a network, if you don't have a network, it's really key to being successful. Another thing that we've done and I recommend is getting involved. So I mentioned the Minority Business Board. So that was the first board I was involved in. Then I went to the Commission for Women for the state of Maryland, was appointed to that. When you get involved, you get information. Information is key. Large companies, established companies, they have a whole team globally that are providing information that's current all the time. As a small business, how can you compete? How can you get information? So volunteering and joining groups is a really good way to get involved, get your voice heard, your needs, and also get information. So I was on the Commission for Women, and then I've been on the US President's Doing Business in Africa Council, and now I'm chair of the Export Council for Department of Commerce in Maryland, DC. So getting involved, you can give back to others, you can help them learn from the mistakes and the successes that you have, and you're also able to really get key information. The other thing is a university connection. Your university is directly vested in your success. It doesn't cost you anything, maybe alumni association dues or a donation of some sort, but truly they are vested in your success. So leveraging a university, when I started my company, also was looking for some support. I went to the head of the alumni board for engineering at University of Maryland, and I talked to her about some of my challenges, and I asked her if she could connect me with an alum. And so she had found an alum who went to the same high school that I graduated from in Baltimore, Polytech, which is an engineering school, and also went to University of Maryland engineering, he's civil engineering. And he's head of a multi-billion-dollar construction company. And she connected me with him, and I met with him, and he spent about 2 hours helping me on my pricing, which to this day, I can remember that conversation. He pulled out a small piece of paper and helped me make sure that my pricing was aligned with industry standards. So those are some of the things that very little investment, if any, but have really been helped us level the playing field. Thank you.
Thank you, so interesting. So last but not least, Alia. So I want to ask about what have been some common barriers faced by women in the supply chain you have operated within, and in your opinion, how should women own and led businesses approach overcoming these challenges?
First of all, regarding the challenges, I'm going to talk about the challenges I have and I had to organize this discussion, because the first challenge I had was to, in a way, present this topic as a business opportunity, because asking people to look at it with, a business lens was very complicated, because most of them were looking at it as a diversity, equity, and inclusion topic, which is also a good reason for that. But yes, just letting them know that there are opportunities for a lot of people, and not only for African women, was a huge challenge. Another challenge was, and fortunately, because I was in the media field, I could also connect with journalists, because some of them don't have time, to dig these type of stories. So I could go and see them and say to them, "Oh, you have to look at it. There is something interesting here and there, etc., etc." And they were happy to have this new topic which was emerging. So what I did was to create this ecosystem where international beauty brands could meet entrepreneurs from US, entrepreneurs from Europe, and entrepreneurs from Africa. Because you have to know that today, the multicultural segment in beauty is really, really growing. And to address those people, most of the time you have to find, specific ingredients. That's why I am talking about this. So you have a an interesting dynamic at the moment where entrepreneurs in Europe who cannot find products for themselves create their own products, which are attractive and attracted for huge brands, for example, like L'Oréal. Yes, so there is an interesting thing, and I was saying just before, I am just coming back from New York. I had an event there. I organized an event at the French consulate there, where I could also connect entrepreneurs from Europe, entrepreneurs from Africa, and Black-owned companies in beauty in the US, just to connect, have a discussion, and see how they could work together. I am working with a specific country, and you won't be surprised, it's the Comoros Islands, because my partner is from Comoros Island, and this is a country where you have very specific, challenges. For example, this ilang-ilang sector is something which is used for, very, very luxury brands. But the problem is that, for example, today, because I went there several times and I could meet those farmers, most of them, as I was saying, were women. Most of them are not paid for many years, but they are still producing, ilang-ilang for those big companies. So the idea is also how to make this supply chain and this value chain, more balanced. So that's very important. So having this discussion, which may be local, can also become a global one. So this is a huge challenge for me to make this happen. But it starts. And for example, with the Comoros Island, I work with the agency, the National Agency of Promotion Investment. So I'm not working directly with the governments, but I try to focus with very specific entities so that they can come. For example, they could come to the US, where they could connect with African American entrepreneurs who are using a lot of African ingredients in their beauty products. And not only, for example, you also have a youth network of Black perfumers in the US who, for example, could connect with this agency so that they could have ilang-ilang for their next products. So it was interesting. So that were my challenges. So that challenges for me, my challenges are to create this global discussion, and you will see, because there is someone in this room who knows what I am doing and who could attend a few events. So I am organizing B2B events in Paris in very specific spaces where I put this question again as a business opportunity. So for example, I organize events and dinners, B2B dinners at the Cercle de l'Union Interalliée, which is a very specific place next to the l'Élysée, 5 minutes walk from the l'Élysée. And this is also for me very important to put this question in spaces where we are not expected. This is very, very important for me. And for example, in New York, it was also very important for us to be at the French consulate, because I also wanted to show a new face of this specific topic, and it was well received, and I am very happy about that. And to also answer this challenge, I am also launching very soon an academy so that women entrepreneurs from Africa and from all over the world could also get insight from big brands, from entrepreneurs, from experts in this industry, so that they could also, for example, we were talking about exports in food. All the challenges you mentioned are the same, in the beauty industry. You also have the participation, which is very important, of the African diaspora. Some of them are going back to Africa and they are promoting, for example, very local ingredients. You have an interesting example. The name of the entrepreneur is Salwa Peterson. She's from Chad, and she's working with Chebe. So she bought a land, and now she's producing these specific ingredients, and she make people work, and especially women. And she also tried to train them, to form them. And you were talking about market insights. This is also approaches that can be very interesting, is to see how at our level we can also, accelerate this dynamic. So this is yes, in a way, how I try to challenge and to create opportunities for these specific people.
Thank you. Very fascinating, all of you. Thank you. And really insightful. So, and where do we go from here? So I have a question for you all. So how can public policy better address the unique challenges faced by women entrepreneurs, notably access to finance, market and entry barriers, and supply chain transparency? And how can governments support more women in accessing global supply chains and export markets? I would like to start by hearing Sean about this question.
All right, thanks. I think that's a great question looking forward. In our experience, I'll say from the U.S. government, we're seeing a lot being done already. Mina mentioned the women business centers and SBA trying to create more opportunities for resources and funding. We have in the United States, they're called U.S. Export Assistance Centers, which are domestic focused for new to exporting, including women-owned businesses, teach companies about the exporting process, planning, assessing, promoting, and expanding your business. We have the commercial service and the foreign agricultural service that have boots on the ground in these export markets that are acting as the marketing arms for SMEs and for women and minority businesses to connect with customers and to connect in global supply chains. And then we have these strong public-private partnerships. So we have what are called district export councils, and these are seasoned exporters, men and women who are providing information on to new to exporters who are very much interested in getting into global supply chains, but they need mentors. And so it's an opportunity to learn from those who are already doing. We also have on the foreign, for food and ag, the U.S. government gives funding to trade associations that are specific to food and ag to be an export promotion. So we have these strong partnerships that exist. We also have our U.S. trade negotiators who are working to have these SME dialogues and real participation with women so that we can make sure that we're learning from each other, that what we're doing in the United States, maybe we can be a best practice, but what are we doing in other parts of the world to learn best practices for our own SMEs? So there's a lot of initiatives that are already happening. I will say when it comes to how we can support women is we need more funding for these types of initiatives. We see that exports are considered enablers for growth, yet we're not spending the level of money at the government in terms of policy and having those additional resources. And that comes from from our Congress and then how that money is being utilized. We need more of that. That's going to be even more problematic as exports may become more difficult and for women to get into the global supply chains from the U.S. as trade policy shifts with our new president-elect Trump potentially having new types of trade policy. So we need these types of sort of infusions into providing export assistance for women to build on the foundations that we already have, but really making it much more accessible. We're doing a good job, but we could just be doing better. So that's what we're seeing, whether it's the policy and the actual practice, or whether it's those boots on the ground, it's really having more resources to support them.
Thank you. Turning now for the table here, Aria, what's your perspective on these questions?
It's a good question. So where do we go from here? A lot has been said regarding finance, regarding trade shows, regarding the fact that women entrepreneurs, specifically in beauty industry, has to also have opportunity to exchange with peer-to-peer, people who do what they do. Governments, again, grants could be interesting. What else? Mentorship, of course, and regulations, because most of them, they have the possibility today to export, but they need regulations, they need norms. I received an SMS today from someone she's based in Ethiopia, and she said to me, "Oh, I just received. I am very happy because now I am referenced. I don't know if you know this association. She's a US association called INCI." Which standardizes the ingredients in the cosmetic products. So she was very happy. She said to me, "I am the only one in Ethiopia who has this privilege, so I will be able now to export." So that's very interesting. And again, connections. And as you were saying just before regarding food, to be referenced by global actors is also very important. And for example, next year, I'm going to organize an event in Grasse. You may know Grasse. Grasse is the world capital of perfume. And because we had an interesting discussion in New York, because you may know that African Americans today, they try to connect, some of them try to reconnect with the African continent. They do it with food, they do it with fashion, they do it with the arts. And today they really want also to be connected with the continent olfactively. And as we saw this dynamic, I said to myself, wow, there is an opportunity here also to create an encounter, a very specific encounter. So in July in Grasse, there will be the Grasse Perfume Week. And I'm going to call my specific session Grâce à l'Afrique, which is in English, thanks to Africa, where people from the US and from everywhere in the world, because you also have people in Brazil and in so many countries who are related to Africa, who will be able to also promote what they are doing, promote their products, and also connect with global actors to hopefully grow their businesses.
Thank you. Turning now to Dr. Kimberly.
Thank you, Anna. So one of the first things is who's export ready? So how do governments get women businesses export ready? So we looked at initiatives to focus on veteran-owned businesses, businesses that work on government contracts overseas. Because if you have a business, we found many businesses, they have government contracts, they may work for USAID, Department of State, but then they don't also look at opportunities in the countries that they're working in. So for our business, we were in Tanzania for 8 years. So we had an office, we had 50 people, we had all of these things that we were supplying to US Army. And we were able to leverage that to go after business on the continent. And I find that many businesses, they may work overseas. Some of them have 30 years of success overseas, but then they never think about offering their services to local governments or local companies. Another thing is information. So Department of Commerce has a new initiative that's focused on getting information right size. When you look at doing business overseas, there's a ton of information. Some information is not current. And as an entrepreneur, your time is extremely limited. So if you have a way to find information that is tailored to a startup, tailored to a business that's export ready, tailored to a business that's already exporting, then that provides a streamlined approach to gathering critical data. Also looking at local governments and grants. So my business, we started our laboratory in Frostburg, right next to a university, Frostburg State University in Western Maryland, Allegheny County, with a workforce grant. It's a small community of 11,000 people. And we were given a grant to set up 10 jobs, and then the pandemic happened. So we used that grant to set up a lab and create high-paying jobs. Also, we've had a grant from Baltimore County for training our workforce. So if you look at opportunities to get local grants that are we see it as win-win, where we as a small business are benefiting because we're getting funding and resources that we need to grow and sustain ourselves. And then these local governments they're creating jobs, they're getting technical jobs, they're getting a business that's paying taxes and a different type of business. In our county, we're one of the few businesses of our type, and we're creating unique jobs that haven't been created for the laboratory. Another thing is also looking at government programs. So finding partners overseas is really critical to your success. So the federal government has a program, a Gold Key Search, that's extremely cost effective, and it partners you with potential vetted partners in the countries of your choice. So focus on programs that are low cost and provide key information. And then also leveraging partnerships with the embassies and in the US, the commercial services. One of the biggest challenges we've had as a business operating overseas is change of government. And now, I mean, we have a change of government too in the US. Change of government can impact your business. Here in the US, if you have a government contract and there's a new change of government, you don't think that your contract's not going to be affected. But there are certain places that if there's a change of government, that contract is going to end or not go forward. So we've been impacted numerous times with change of government and working with the embassy. We learned the hard way. We didn't work with the embassy at first. The embassy has so much information that they provide to their businesses, letting them know about your projects ahead of time and utilizing their resources. And embassies having programs to have more kind of outreach to companies. There's many opportunities to get clear information that is really essential to your success. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to turn to Anya. I'm listening.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, so I will, Kimberly touched on a lot of things about women entrepreneurship here in North America and the Western world. So I'll more specifically just talk about women entrepreneurs in the supply chain. And I do want to highlight two projects that I think have done a very successful job at creating women's supply chains in areas that that traditionally have been very male dominated, and that's the Just Gold project in the DRC and the Environmental Women in Action for Development, which is out of Uganda. And there are more of these, so I'm happy to discuss or send more information of these types of programs. But I think looking to these organizations and how they have been able to overcome social barriers, facilitate discussion, to allow women to enter a traditionally male-dominated supply chain, I think would be very interesting and will probably apply across supply chains. So whether it's minerals, textiles, cosmetics, I think the lessons from these organizations could be very interesting. I also think we are in a particularly interesting time to be able to create more transparency about what it is happening in a lot of these communities, and in particularly in the mining communities of some of these very informal mines, and using technology and social media to facilitate a bit more transparency on what is happening, what opportunities we could have to support women. And then in turn, connecting women entrepreneurs in Western communities with women entrepreneurs in other communities in the supply chain would be very interesting. So for myself, I had tried to create sort of a closed loop women diamond mining operation, which I'm still working on. But as a woman entrepreneur in the Western world with primarily female clients, there is demand for myself, for instance, to be able to use a mineral that is mined by women and supports women in different places in the world. So I think kind of facilitating that transparency and that dialogue would be very interesting. I also think that asking people in these communities, what is success to you and what does that look like? And having it in a sort of roundtable manner with all the stakeholders, I think could be very an interesting way to sort of break down some of the social barriers that currently exist to make it difficult for women to find success. Having everyone at the table heard, men, corporations, all of the social kind of players that make it very complex for women to enter these supply chains. I think finding out what success is to everyone and creating a long-term solution that isn't, is kind of constantly evolving. I think kind of having sort of a system that is, maybe not a solution that's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution, but that, has some testing mechanisms in place, is able to adapt to things and social norms as they change, I think would be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you to all. So, and because we are running out of time, so I can open the floor just for 1 or 2 questions. So don't come all at the same time, but please. Who wants to raise the flag? And I cannot.
Hello. Yes, can you hear me? Perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, thanks a lot for your insightful testimonies. I'd like to enhance the education part of untapping the potential of women. Thanks a lot. You've all spoken on how you did the first steps regarding your motivation, your passion, which you also highlighted. And it also came from a real world opportunity where you saw a problem, you wanted to help and to put a footprint of change, as one of the panelists said. So I'd also like to show that I think we need to empower more women, but in education throughout high school and also college. I think that's the first point where we can also tell to them, you can be an entrepreneur in STEM fields. If I may take my own example, when I was 10, I was really passionate about mathematics. And my uncle told me, well, you don't have enough grades to be an engineer. And it really put my mind in like, okay, I'm not going to be an engineer. I'm going to do a business school, and that's who I'm going to be in the future. And I was only 10. So I think if for education, we can show women throughout, different courses, different resources, that they are able to do so. And Mrs. Brown, you said something really interesting when you said not seeing somebody who looks like you. And I think it can start also from a young age, seeing young people, young women doing really outstanding things that we thought was not possible. And I think it's really through education that we can start for, like, in the future, having more women in supply chains, but just addressing those topics. So I wanted to ask all of the panelists, how did your education help you to go into those fields? And do you think, and do you agree saying that we need to invest more in education for women in terms of entrepreneurship in supply chains?
Thank you. Wants to start, but you have like 30 seconds.
Okay. So thank you for that question. And I think it goes to really supporting young people, we're talking about young girls, with what your passion is. Really, not everyone's going to be an engineer, not everyone's going to be in cosmetics or mining, but everyone has a passion and gift. So if we educate teachers, because we've done a program for U.S. Embassy in Ghana where we did a STEM program for middle school girls and their teachers. You can really change things by just embracing what you're good at, what you're interested in, and not discouraging girls. So
I'll just jump in and build on that. You asked about, my education was focused on international from the get-go, the importance of languages and cultivating those with young people. Here in the DC area, we have the George Washington University, and they have a cyber program. Cyber stands for Center for International Business, Education, and Research. And there are cybers all over the United States, and their focus is on engaging colleges and engaging college students, but they're also taking the next step and going down a level into high school and educating on the importance of trade and the importance of, again, finding your passion and trade in your passion of whatever is your focus, and doing that too. And especially focused, there will be a startup for focusing on high school girls coming from the DC, West Virginia area to do some work there, and that's really exciting because it's really touching on this at a young age. So I echo the importance of it and the passion that you need to bring.
Oh, yeah. Yes, very quickly. Your question is very interesting. Just to be quick, in my family, I have no entrepreneurs, to be honest with you, no entrepreneurs. So I have no example around me, but there was something I really wanted to do from the very beginning, is to impact people's lives. It was very important for me. And I didn't have the network because my family is very modest. I didn't go to business schools or whatever, but persistence and meeting people, all the way of your career was an opportunity for me. And I tried to keep relationship with those people. And today it helps me a lot. And I just want to go back to the question of training. And it is documented, especially in Africa, when women have data, they train themselves. This is documented. This is what they do directly. So this is one thing. And the other thing, just to go back to Comoros Island, because I saw something which was very important for me and which also corroborate and relate to what you said. I saw some women, in distillery doing their thing for ilang ilang and, cloves, ingredients, etc. And they were with their kids, especially their young girls. And the young girls were looking at them and the conditions of production was not very good. And I asked them, so what would you like to do, when you will be grown up? And she said to me, I don't want to do what my mom is doing because I see the conditions she is in and I'm not inspired. So again, if we make sure that the conditions of doing what they are doing can be, better, maybe tomorrow. And this is also why I'm doing all the things I am doing. It's for the young generations. I want them to be inspired by their mothers and what they are doing. And this question is key. This is a sector which is key today. And yes, that's it.
Anya?
Yes, I think that I do think that we come from, especially in the Western world, we come from a community where, or sort of a dialogue where there's sort of this expectation that you check all the boxes, you go to university, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think what you touched on there about how important it is to have a role model and to educate women on what opportunities are ahead of them and what change they can create and what change they can make. And yeah, like it's been said, to follow your passions and not let social norms and expectations and barriers stop you. I always think like bravery is a muscle that you have to practice. And so putting yourself in situations that are uncomfortable, that you do feel challenged, you feel like you are challenging a social norm or you're doing something that hasn't been done before, I think it's very important. And I think being a role model to other, especially at a young age, like you said, you were 10 years old, I think it's a very important way. It's actually a crucial way to sort of inspire the younger generation, both here and elsewhere. So yeah, thank you for bringing that comment up.
Thank you. I think we have now an online question, right, David? You want to share with us?
Sure, thank you very much. So there were a few questions online. There was one question about networks and what are some examples of networks. And I think I'll put that aside for a moment because we're going to be doing a summary document. And in that document, we will add a lot of information about resources and case studies. So we'll pick that up in the document. But there's a second question that I want to direct to Dr. Brown, because it picks up on the point you were making when you were telling us about pricing and how you were discussing it with a mentor. So the question is about women entrepreneurs struggling to value their products and services. And so the question is, are there any tools or guides or training programs that you know of that you could recommend for someone?
Thank you, David. So as far as valuing what you're doing, a service or your products, SBA has tons of resources around that. So definitely looking for your small business administration or equivalent to get some assistance with that. And mentorship. So for me, I'm not in construction, not interested in construction, but I know construction companies have tons of widgets and they're really, really good at valuing every single little thing. So having a mentor that was a construction company would help me because they're really good at valuing safety, schedule, and being at the budget is essential for every construction company. So I encourage people to look outside of their industry too, because you know this one thing and you're good at that one thing, which is why you start a business. Technical people start businesses, and people with passions and visions start businesses. However, if you develop a network of people that do something different, something that maybe doesn't interest you, something you're not good at. I started a business, I mentioned software. Computer science was my least favorite class. I almost laugh about it. I can never get my code to compile because I always would have a period or a comma or a space. And that's really essentially the thing that started my business. So really look outside of your comfort area and get mentors and resources that are complementary but not competitive is what I would recommend.
Thank you. We don't have any more time for any more questions, so I would like to thank all of you. It was such an interesting discussion, such an interesting sharing of views from you. Thank you. Thank you for the speakers online also for getting time to join us. And I look forward to the minutes and the examples that you said is going to be part of the minutes. And now I think it's time for the other networking part outside coffee.